Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 15 of the Santa and his reindeer ornament tutorial. This is the Santa and his reindeer ornament that we are making. It is so cute and colorful and Christmassy. And today we're going to be making the unit called Fourth Top Snow. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 14 yet, that's okay. You can do these out of order. I'll have those videos listed down below in the description. That way when you finish this one, you can go back and watch those. We just have a few materials to get ready, so let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we'll be using in today's video are all Miyuki Delicas. I have opaque light sapphire, white pearl AB, bright copper plate, dyed silver lined red, opaque black, and matte metallic bronze gold iris. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to call this blue, white, copper, red, black, and brown. We'll also need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire thread in the color Crystal, and this is a 4-pound thread. You could also use a 6-pound thread with this project. And then I also like to use a size 10 beading needle. If all you have is an 11 or a 12, that would work too. For implements, I like to use my long nose pliers to hold onto my thread at the end of the video, and then I cut my thread with scissors. And then today I'm going to show you how I use the fire method to end the tail. So all we need to do is thread our needle with about 3 feet of thread, and then we can get started. So now I've threaded my needle and now I'm ready to pick up my first 3 beads. Let's pick up 3 blue beads. And then we'll take these beads and pull them all the way down to the bottom of the thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. Now let's tie a square knot. So we'll cross over on top and then pull the tail through. And then we'll cross over on top again and pull the tail through. So now you should have 2 loops that looks a little bit like a snowman. Now I'm going to put my 2 fingers in the lower loop, the one that has the beads in it, and then I'm going to tug on the tail thread and the long thread until that top loop turns into a knot. Now, I'm not going to touch the thread to the flame, but I'm going to get it super close so that it melts the tip. And it turns the tip into this teensy little knot or bead. Now, keeping our fingers in the loop, I'm going to be pulling on the long thread while twisting the loop until that knot at the end of the tail meets the long thread. Now I'm going to take my thumbnail and I'm going to pull that knot all the way down to the beads. And it turns the beads into this teensy little triangle. And that completes row number 1. So you'll notice that our knot is kind of right in the center of those 2 beads. Let's tug on the long thread until that to one side until that knot looks like it's coming out of one of the beads. And then it also looks like the thread is coming out of that bead. So now we're ready to pick up 2 blue beads. And since our thread looks like it's coming out of this bead, let's sew through the next bead, the one that it's not coming out of. And then we're going to try to get our 2 new beads to sit right on top of their buddies, the beads right below them. Now let's pick up 2 more blue beads. And we're coming out of this bead now, so let's sew through the next. And once again, try to get our new beads to sit right on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up 2 blue beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead, and this time let's sew through its buddy also, the one that's right below it. When you sew through 2 beads, what we're doing is we're stepping up, putting our thread in position to start the next row. So that means that we've completed row number 2, and now we get to start row number 3. Let's start with 2 blue beads and sew through the next bead. Now let's pick up 1 blue bead. And we're coming out of this bead, the second one right here. You'll notice that the next bead is actually set downward a little bit. We're going to skip the downward bead and we're going to sew through the one that's poking up. So we're skipping the down bead and we're sewing through the up bead. Now let's pick up 2 blue beads and we'll sew through the next bead. Now let's pick up 1 blue bead. We're going to skip that down bead and sew through the up bead. Now we'll pick up 2 blue beads. Oops. And sew through the next. And now we'll pick up 1 blue bead. This is the last bead in this row. So we're going to skip the down bead. We're going to sew through the up bead and its buddy. Sewing through those last 2 beads means that we're stepping up. And now we get to start row number 4. Let's start with 2 blue beads and sew through the next. Then 1 blue and sew through the up. 1 blue and sew through the up. 2 blue beads and sew through the next. 1 blue and sew through the up. 1 blue and sew through the up. 2 blue beads and sew through the next. 1 blue and sew through the up. And 1 blue. This is our last bead in this row, so we'll sew through those last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 5. Let's start with 2 blue beads. Then 1 blue. 1 blue 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads, and now we get to start row number 6. Let's start with 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 copper beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads, and now we get to start row number 7. Let's start with 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue and 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we have actually reached the top of our triangle. So our triangle is not going to get any taller from this point on, but it is going to get wider and lower down at the bottom. So we're going to add beads along these sides, but we're not going to make it grow taller. So in order to do that, what we need to do is, without picking up any more beads, we just need to sew through the next bead, and that puts our thread in position to start row number 8. Let's start by adding 1 blue bead, then 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue and 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 brown, 1 blue and 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we've reached the top of our triangle again. So what we're going to do is just turn our triangle over, and that puts our thread in position to start row number 9. Let's start row number 9 by adding 1 blue bead, then 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 brown, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 2 copper beads, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now you'll notice that we don't have an up bead to sew through to get our last bead on in this row. So what we need to do is turn our needle around and sew down that top bead, and then try to get our new bead to pop into place where it's sitting where it's supposed to. Now we're coming out of the bottom of this top bead right here. So let's sew down one more bead, one more row. And then we're going to turn our needle around again and sew up the bead right next to the bead that we're coming out of. Now we can sew up that top bead again. And then we can sew down the new bead that we just added. Turning our triangle over. And now our thread is in position to start row number 10. Let's start row number 10 with 1 blue bead, then 1 blue, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 copper, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 brown, 1 brown, 2 blue beads, 1 copper, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 1 blue, and 1 blue. Now we've reached the top of our triangle again, so now let's just flip it over, and now we are ready to start row number 11. Let's start with 1 blue bead, then 1 blue, 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 2 blue beads, 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, 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 2 brown beads, 1 copper, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, and 1 blue. And once again, we don't have our up bead to sew through, so let's sew down that top bead and try to get our new bead to sit right where it's supposed to. And now we can sew down the middle bead in the second row. And then turning directions, we're going to sew up the bead right next to the one that we're coming out of. And then sew up the middle bead on the top row. And then sew down the new bead that we just added. Turning our triangle over. And now we are in position to start row number 12. Let's start with 1 blue bead, 1 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 copper, 1 brown and 1 black, 1 brown, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 blue, 1 red, 1 blue, 1 brown, 1 brown, 1 blue, 2 blue beads, 1 blue, 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 and 1 blue. And that completes our 12 rows of our triangle. Let's turn our triangle over. And now we get to start adding what I call the connection beads. So our connection beads are added onto some of the sides of the units, and then other sides will not get them. Every unit is different, and we do that so that we can connect our units together. So in this particular unit, we're going to have connection beads along this side and along the bottom, but we're not going to have any connection beads on this side. So let's start by adding our connection beads down this side. Let's start with 1 blue bead, then 1 blue, 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 and 1 blue. Now we've reached the corner. Let's cap the corner by adding 1 blue bead. And it also turns that corner into a little point. And now we can start adding our connection beads along the bottom. So let's start with one blue, one blue, one brown, one brown, one red, one brown, one brown, one brown, one blue, one brown, and one brown. And now we have reached our last corner, so let's cap it with one brown bead, turning it into a point. Now what I like to do is turn over my triangle and let's sew up 6 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now let's do what I like to call the zigzag. So we're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew down the bead right next to it. So sewing in the opposite direction, and then sew up the bead right next to that one. And now let's sew up 2 more rows, 1 and 2. Now let's do another zigzag. Coming out of the top of this bead, let's sew down the bead right next to it. And then sew up the bead right next to that one. Sew up 2 more rows, 1 bead at a time. And now what those zigzags have done is they've made this last bead that we added extra secure, so it's not going to come loose when we're connecting our units together. And so it's time to start, or to cut off our thread. So let's snip it off by holding it with our long nose pliers and then getting our scissors as close to the bead as possible without cutting the bead, and then just snip it right off. And that completes our unit. We only need one of these units for our project, but I wanted to tell you, I think this is my very favorite unit in this entire project, and it's for 2 reasons. It's got Rudolph's little red nose. Oh my gosh, I love him so much. And his cute little tail. So 2 of my favorite beads in this project. If you have a favorite bead or something that you're loving about this project, put it down in the comments. I love to read those comments. Or if you just want to add an emoji to the comments, put a reindeer or a deer in the comments. That would be so cute. Alrighty, I will see you in a sec. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.